George, sorry, you've gone for the Telegraph. What caught your eye?
I'll tell you what worried me there. I was reviewing the papers on my radio show on Friday night, Saturday morning's papers, and every single one except The Guardian and the Mail had the story that these were British Pakistanis that had launched this attack. Indeed, the Daily Mirror named 7 out of the 10 were British, and even included Hartlepool, where there's only a couple of thousand Muslims live in a big town surrounded by others. And I thought it was horrifically dangerous. And I've complained to the Press Complaints Commission about the coverage. Here's the Sunday Telegraph, written a whole editorial based on a premise that's now turned out to be false, namely that these British were British Pakistanis. The enemy within, we should be hunting for the true enemy within. This is the language of strife. And it's highly dangerous and inflammatory.
On Friday afternoon and later in the evening, pretty senior Whitehall sources were ringing up people like myself and saying, we don't think there's anything in this. There are no Brits. We're seeing no evidence whatsoever. So is it a surprise?
If you were a British Pakistani going into the newsagent on Saturday morning, you would have been confronted with a sea of front pages pointing an accusatory finger at you. And what if some extremists, far-right extremists, for example, had taken the law into their own hands, say up in Hartlepool where the local Muslim people couldn't defend themselves? We'd be looking at very serious culpability.
You can't deny that there are elements in this country that do seek to do damage.
We do have to wait. We don't. I mean, there has also been an industry of denial on every front. India denies it could possibly be its own Muslims. We need to wait because there are global connections here. They're bound to be, because where do these weapons come from? We have to keep cool and wait. And I agree with you that jumping out the way people did and blaming I don't think it is the time for denials, because there must be some international connections, because, you know, they couldn't have had the wherewithal, the money, the weapons. But we have to wait and see. I don't think it's time to deny either, actually.
Okay, moving away from that story, George, there is actually a connection to this next story, which you've picked out of the Times, and that's Ian Duncan Smith's view on council estates, because he takes the view, and you probably share it, that poverty breeds extremism.
No, I thought we were...
That's one that you picked out, yeah.
George had
Mine was the Damien Green story, but by all means, please go ahead with that one
I think we can talk about this. I mean, you know, Ian Duncan Smith is turning out to be a kind of Victorian, committed man in many ways. He's given years of his life, and one has to admire what he's saying here is really important. That what we've done over the last 30 years is create ghettos where we have put all the most broken families. Now, this is in part an acknowledgement of Tory policies, if you like, as well as New Labour, because, you know, the sea change that took place in the country in the last 30 years, everybody seems to be responsible. And it's a really important story, of course, which because of all the international news. And yes, if you have these ghettos, and you have, you know, you are in a kind of prison from which you cannot break out, then what does that do?
George, are you looking forward to having your office in the Palace of Westminster raided?
Well, it is, you know, a very big... If it weren't for Mumbai, this would be the #1 story. And I think a number of heads are going to roll. And one of them might be Mr. Speaker himself, because previous speakers have actually lost their lives defending the privilege of members of Parliament to act freely politically. We're not talking about if an MP is involved in real crime, but his political work must be immune from the state's interference. And yet, here's a senior member of Parliament, Damien Green, his house raided, his office raided, his phone's taken off him, he's now communicating on Facebook because he has no mobile telephone, and all because he was politically embarrassing the government. Now, I'm with the government rather than him on the issues he was raising, but the idea that a member of Parliament can be stopped in this way and turned over upside down in this way is very, very serious. So the government, if they knew about it, are too wicked to be the government. And if they didn't know about it, then the police are out of control and we have a government that's too stupid to be the government.
Speaking of, well, not stupidity, but certainly perhaps inopportune remarks, we have to move on to the final one, and that's Nick Clegg, leader of the Liberal Democrats.
It's marvellous.
He's sitting on a plane.
We're laughing about this. He's sitting on the plane with a Sunday Mirror reporter in front of him, slagging off his shadow cabinet colleagues, most of whom are complete strangers to the public, I should add. He's talking about people that very few people know. But we were just saying, The one person he doesn't mention is Vince Cable.
Yeah.
If Vince was the leader of the Liberal Democrats, they'd be up 10 points in the polls
Entertain the
overnight.
nation, will you, George? Just give us one of the quotes.
Well, fabulous. Steve Webb, he is the environment spokesman for the Liberals. He must go. Webb is a problem, and I cannot stand him.